Welcome to the 13th episode of the 4th series of the Women in CX podcast, a series dedicated to real talk conversations between women in customer experience. Listen in as we share our career stories, relive the moments that shaped us, and voice our opinions as loudly as we like about all manner of CX subjects. I'll be your host, Clare Muscutt, and in today's episode, I'll be talking to one of our community's founding members and the queen of Agile CX. Let me introduce you to today's inspiring guest. She's the founding director of the European Customer Consultancy, has been named among the top 150 CX professionals globally, and has managed, consulted and mentored leading organisations and individuals around the world. She promotes best practice and sharing as the executive director at the Customer Institute and is the inventor of the Agile CX Implementation Toolkit. Please welcome to the show, CX sister, Olga Potaptseva.
Hi Claire, so good to see you. How are you?
I'm so good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you very much. You're looking very well.
You're looking gorgeous, and I know I said this already, but that blue top on you is just fabulous. And for anyone listening, you have to go to our YouTube channel and take a look at Olga's colours today. She looks fabulous. And thank you to everybody who's joining us today and listening along at home. Welcome to the Women in CX podcast. And this is a really special episode for me because it's the first time we've had one of our members join for the second time on the podcast. So this is Olga's actual second episode, but I was just reflecting on, the first episode was before Women in CX as a community even existed, wasn't it?
It was, wasn't it? And what a journey. It's been a roller coaster. It's been highs and lows, but I'm hearing you're having great successes and the community is growing. We're all enjoying it very much. And you've just done a world tour of Women in CX. So amazing progress, good results. Congratulations on that.
We're getting there, and I'm just so grateful to you for you being one of the first 9 founding members and helping me on that journey. The European Customer Consultancy, your business, being a big part of that and helping with us with the research that kicked all of this off back in January 2021. So
it's my pleasure. It's a very rewarding community to be part of, and myself and my company, which has now grown a bit, we're all thrilled to be helping.
Oh yeah, and exactly the same for you, right? Like we were both in this kind of pandemic point in time where there needed to be a pivot, but actually for you it wasn't so hard because you'd already built a fully remote agency. And I'm going to come back and ask you more questions about that shortly, but just for our listeners, the question that we always ask is the opportunity to tell a bit of your backstory and how you got into CX and where you are today. Let the listeners know, who is Olga Potaptseva?
Sure. So my personal background is that I'm originally from Russia. I moved to the US when I was 15 to do a year at high school. Then I came back. Then when I was at university, I went to Germany to study there. Then I moved back, and that was sort of the start of my CX interest in my career, because whilst I was in Germany, I was studying economics and marketing, and a significant part of that course was connected to market research. And as some of you may know, GfK, which in German is Gesellschaft für Konsumforschung, which is an institute for customer research, later got rebranded for Growth for Knowledge. Because Gesellschaft für Konsumforschung, not many people can pronounce, I suppose.
I did not know that, and yeah, it was a bit of a mouthful, wasn't it? But
yeah.
Great story.
So that's a very well established, well regarded institution in Germany, and I got very interested in how they operate. What is it that they find out about customers that's so useful and so interesting? So when I went back to Moscow, I got a position at GfK and very quickly started leading a team there. And it was all about customer research. There wasn't, in hindsight, there isn't much more to it, even though at the time we felt like we are taking baby steps towards customer centricity and customer experience. We just didn't know back then. That's what it's called. I got to lead a loyalty development program at GfK because I had a little bit of a misfortune of promising to the client. As you know, fresh out of university, I got to lead a project, and then I was presenting to the board with findings, and they said, well, you really need to encourage loyalty for your customers. And they asked naturally whether that's something we could do for them, and I was like, yeah, sure, we have a loyalty program. And then I look at my manager, and she was like, we don't. So I got put in charge to develop the loyalty program, which connected me very well to the bigger GfK community. And I found people in the UK and in Germany who were interested in the same subject. So together we worked on the methodology, and it got rolled out globally, which is one of the kind of stepping stones in my career.
So so serendipitous though, right? Like if you hadn't made that mistake in that meeting, none of this would have happened. Maybe like sliding doors moment. Hey,
ignorance is bliss sometimes.
And the just youthfulness, isn't it? Like the belief in yourself at that moment. Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, we can do it. Why not? So then when I moved to London in 2008, I took a position again at GfK. And I was, again, very fortunate to lead an account for an amazing individual and an amazing company, Thomson Reuters, who demonstrated that customer experience is something very practical. So they took our research findings and they completely informed the contact center transition from St. Louis in the US to Manila, based on those results. So the way they did it, they wouldn't shut down a team in St. Louis until customer ratings and customer feedback were at least at the same level for the team in Manila. And that was a very, very dynamic program, very insightful. It informed lots of coaching, lots of skill building for Manila agents, and generally a very successful call center transformation, which then got me interested to explore how insights could become something bigger and how we can drive real business change with that. And I moved into the kind of practitioner shoes and led a customer experience function for one of the UK insurance companies, domestic and general. And this is where I've learned so much about being a CX practitioner, not just building theories and constructs and strategies, but actually doing it and implementing, and what are the real life challenges there. And that kind of kickstarted my interest and my career in CX.
Yeah, so I just picking up on a few things there. So obviously amazing businesses and brands with GfK and Reuters, D&G Insurance. But yeah, I totally agree with you that that kind of practical grounding and having done the job is super important, but also the realization that whatever kind of company, industry or sector you work in, it can look completely different, right? So a lot of the theories or the widely held beliefs about customer experience don't necessarily apply everywhere. And trying to approach things from a strategy down as opposed to action up approach is a lot of the reason I think why so many customer experience initiatives fail. And I, like you, very much, experimented, learned like on the job what worked, what didn't, like what the way in to influence the organization was, as well as the approach we needed to take. And fundamentally, it is all about using what we do to deliver business results, right? And fathoming and finding your own way to do that wherever you are is way more important than trying to shoehorn a strategy that has been kind of marketed somewhere, or maybe a digital or technology solution that's an apparent silver bullet for customer experience. Like being in there, really listening and understanding and finding out like what works, what's not working. Like there isn't really a theoretical approach to be able to do that. It's very, very much hands-on. But I love that story. That's a great story. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, so like now kind of like moving into this like entrepreneurial world and setting up your own company, what was like one of the biggest challenges or barriers you've had to overcome to become the woman that you are today?
Well, I'll tell you another story that, my personal and professional life seem to be very closely interconnected. So what prompted me to establish my own company is a range of personal circumstances. At the time, I was happily living in London. After D&G, I moved on to work for the Bank of Cyprus and then for a London-based consultancy. And I wasn't planning to move away from London at all. And then on one March day, my sister called me, and she's like, I'm really fed up living in Russia. I don't want to do this anymore. So I'm going to move to Georgia. Well, what the hell are you talking about? Where's Georgia? Well, why would we move there? And she's like, no, I've got it figured out. And I'm telling the story as if it was an easy decision, but obviously I've been living away from my family for a while, and it's always been at the back of our mind that we'd like to reunite at some point. And the decision has been made there and then. I was like, oh, okay, if you're moving, I'll move too. And then she was like, oh, okay, if you're moving, then we'll convince the parents to move as well. So we all packed up with children and whatnot and moved to Georgia in Southern Europe. And that presented a specific challenge for me because that was pre-pandemic. Remote work was not on the agenda.
It wasn't even a thing, was it, back
then? It wasn't really a thing, yeah. I always made a point to work a couple of days a week remotely from home, but still that's, very much of a physical presence in the office. Being fully remote wouldn't have been a solution. So I started then thinking about what could I do? And I guess that's where the entrepreneurial mindset comes in. Like, okay, well, can I do something in Georgia? Probably not, because that's not really a market for customer experience at the scale that I need. And I started building partnerships with individuals and consultants that I knew, trying to see if I could do things for them as a subcontractor. And that's how the remote story started. And coming back to your question, what was the biggest challenge is convincing people that it could work. It actually is okay to be based somewhere else, which sounds really funny now, because now I think we're all convinced. But at the time, that was the biggest barrier. And I had to work quite a lot. I had to work at a lower rate than I usually would, just to prove myself and add value wherever I was. I had to travel a lot as well, which is fine by me. And that's how the concept of my business started. I don't work in the region where I live. I'm one of those digital nomads, I guess. But I do go and visit my clients in the Middle East or UK or Europe. US, we always work remotely or have been so far, wherever business takes me, really.
Wow. Again, another serendipitous moment that changed the course of your entire life and career. Your sister saying, hey,
let's move. But I guess that comes back to having the belief in yourself. Anything is possible. Whatever career path you'd like to have, whatever lifestyle is suitable for you, you can make it work.
Yeah, well, I guess like reflected on my own experience, I did exactly that. I left corporate knowing that I didn't want to be in the corporate world anymore because I was disillusioned by having this big job that I thought was everything I ever wanted, that turned out not to be what I wanted, because I loved being hands-on, running workshops, doing all that kind of stuff. I figured out like the thing that really flipped my switches was being a CX design or being in the CX design space rather than in the management and leadership space. And then, like similarly took the risk and ended up living and working as a digital nomad for 2 years before the pandemic and having the time of my life. Like if I'd have kind of like sat there and tried to plan out how I'd make that happen, I wouldn't have had a clue, but I just followed the opportunities as they came and looked back and I was like, oh my God, I'm actually a digital nomad, like living and working as a global consultant and keynote speaker with a fully remote agency behind me. Like I didn't design that, it just happened over time.
I guess we both had a bit of design behind it, so you kind of design and iterate as you go along in the best practice of service design. And I always had an aspiration that I would like to have my own company, not continue working as a subcontractor for other people all the time. And I took steps that made sense to be who I want to be. And as they say, if you start behaving as your future self, you become your future self. And now I work with global corporations and governments around the world, and I'm happy to involve other people as well into what I do.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. And it's a moment that I've not really had a chance to pause and reflect on until like right now. The similarity between like designing your life and your lifestyle and delivering it being something iterative that happens quite experimentally, just like customer experience and CX design is kind of establishing a vision for what you think you want it to be. It isn't necessarily a blueprint at that point, but testing and learning about what works and experimenting and allowing the path to unfold in the direction where there's demand for the work, for example, or understanding your own wants and needs even more and how you can fulfill those. I just never really made that connection that we designed and architected our own life experience with agility.
And hopefully failing fast. If you have to fail, recognize that and move on.
Yeah, and do you know what, that's been my biggest issue, I think, now in the startup space, about to kind of go after the big leagues and get investment and the VC route and stuff, is like I've always been absolutely petrified of what would happen if I fail, and that's what's held me back from doing that until now, because the higher risk of someone else's money, I just thought I didn't want to shoulder that responsibility, and I wasn't entirely sure that I could do it. But it was a conversation with one of my mentors where he's an exited founder and sold his business, and said, you're only seeing that I've sold my company for X multi-million dollars, but you didn't see like the $1 million or so that I lost in getting to that point. So being able to take those risks and experience failure on the way to success, I guess it's something that I'm not yet accustomed to or comfortable with, but I'm prepared to now, and I wasn't before.
Yeah, that's very good. Congratulations on that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Very important step.
Yes, steps to take. So be ready, listeners. You're going to be hearing much about many more of my failures along the way. But it's true though, I guess, like even it's failing my way to success, like with customer experience, it's totally true. Like I'd always be running into barriers and roadblocks and have to figure out a way around it. Like I didn't come up with the model that I apply for customer experience design overnight and it just worked. It was 15 years in the making of figuring out actually from what didn't work how to get around the problem or to architect that. So
and that kind of comes back to our point, doesn't it, on one size doesn't fit all in CX. You can't just take a strategy that someone else designed and put it into your organization and it works. At best it becomes a wallpaper, and at worst everyone just ignores that. So it's really fitting in with your environment, your organization, ways of doing things, and applying critical thinking, failing sometimes, succeeding more of the times.
And crossed, hopefully
paving your way to success. It's hard work to become a customer enabled organization. It doesn't happen overnight.
And I love that word, that you, I get uniquely, I've been talking about this. I've not heard anyone else be talking about customer enabled organizations before. And, like we are clearly very much aligned on the CX practicality, action orientation. But please do tell the audience more about customer enabled organizations. What does it actually mean? And how can customer experience be seen as a capability like marketing or finance?
Sure. You will certainly be hearing more about this because I love this term, and it's not something I came up with single-handedly. It's a collaboration effort with partners of mine, ICG, who invented the customer needs system. So it's a tool that we use for customer insights that is unique in itself. So it's not looking at your propensity to recommend, which is a retrospective experience assessment. It's not looking at your satisfaction. It's purely looking at what is it that the customer needs from your company in their own words. And then it puts it into a system, a hierarchy of needs and hierarchy of drivers. And it's very practical. So everything I do is very practical. And so, for example, if you find out that customers' core needs group is communication, that's useful, but not very actionable, because communication could mean many different things. But what's important is that you get top 3 to top 5, top 10 drivers of communication. So what can you do specifically to improve their perception of communication? And this is where your enablement starts, because it resonates with the company, it resonates with their objectives, and it fits into the system. And that kind of bridges us to a very important point, that whatever you're trying to achieve in customer experience has to be aligned with the way your business operates and the business objectives and general brand and business strategy. And I always talk in knowledge sharing and education sessions, I always cite an example of Ryanair as one of the I shouldn't say best customer experience brands, but customer enabled
expectation management brands.
Precisely. So the business strategy is to get passengers from A to B safely at the lowest possible price. That's it. So if you came in with the experience strategy that said, carry everyone luggage for them, it's just not going to fly, because that's not part of the business strategy. It doesn't fit with the brand. So if your experience strategy says, okay, by not charging people for using the toilet on the airplane, we are going to minimize the damage to the brand, or we're going to minimize the number of rejections or negative publicity, that would really resonate. That would explain to the business why we shouldn't do such a thing. And it's a little bit of a made up example, but what I'm trying to say is that make sure there is alignment. And if you can achieve that, then CX becomes an instrument for the business, not an add-on. Sadly, we saw many CX teams being made redundant during the pandemic, because businesses saw them as a nice to have. It's all about hugging our customers and being nice to them. It may be, if that fits with your brand strategy, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. So it's another lens to look at your operations, just like marketing, finance, IT. And if we as CX practitioners deliver that, then we have the right to sit at the table. We're doing something useful for the business by being aligned to our customer needs and expectations.
Yeah, and I obviously wholeheartedly agree with this. We talked about this subject so many times offline, but I agree. I guess the way I practiced on the business side and with clients was always this intersection between different departments and divisions, where we could provide a line of sight and a perspective that they didn't have, that could increase value. So for example, like customer experience feedback about like the proposition itself, like what do we need to do differently with our product and service, you can see that from the lens of experience, or even kind of operational efficiency. You can look at, well, where are we over investing in something that doesn't matter to customers that much, and where are we like completely missing stuff that we should be invested in? How do we rebalance that equation? Like, that's useful, isn't it? It's practical, it's pragmatic.
Yes.
Like where should we be heading, like with propositions and services? Like there's intersection. I think it's super interesting with like research and customer experience, and being able to move forward from having data sets and insights into being able to redesign something that can have a span that informs the work that's being done in proposition, product, digital, multiple departments, because it's an experience vision for what the end customer wants, needs, and we can deliver in the future because of who we are as a brand. Like, we've got a set of tools that can help to do that. Like, who wouldn't want that? But like you say, so often it's being seen as like, let's go and hug all of our customers and make everything amazing. Like,
Yes, yeah.
that's not valuable. That's why people and teams get made redundant, right?
It's
Because
just
not
driving more cost into the business from, senior management perspective. We are operating all right at the moment. Why are you asking us to do more and invest more, and what's return on that investment? And it's a very, very valid question. We can't just come up to the board alongside marketing and all the other departments and say, okay, marketing are proposing this project, they need 100,000 investment and they're going to deliver 500,000 return in a year's time. And then CX people come and say, we need 100,000 investment, we don't know how long it's going to take to return that, if it's going to return this all, but it's all going to be fine, trust me. That's not a good business case. We really need to start thinking about it from solutions perspective. So,
but then sorry, just come.
No, I'm just very excited to tell you about a case study that I'm working on.
Go for it. Sorry.
With Awards International, which is a very successful company. They are delivering, what they're meant to be delivering. The customer satisfaction is high, but we are working on their customer journeys, and just the alignment between the teams and the ideas that they come up with really highlighted to us that the way the business is operating now and the level of personalization is great, but it's not scalable. So we can't scale all of the awards consultants to serve many, many more customers. So where is it that we need to keep that, and where we can afford to automate things, make the journey just as smooth, but remove the interactions that don't matter as much to customers. So designing that service proposition has been great because it's looking into the operating model and really generating more for an already successful business.
A nice example. And again, preaching to the choir here, because that's how we built Wix, right? Co-design, yes. Establishing what's most important and scaling a business model over time, as we've learned. And yeah, like marketing automation, I didn't have a clue about that. I knew it was something that existed, but as a kind of startup founder, having to be really super hands-on with learning how to do that and figuring out actually there's so much that can be done that doesn't remove value just because it's not a person doing something manually.
Yes.
But being able to establish that from the outset is super important. I was just to catch on that thing, when we were like trying to talk over each other, I was just going to add a bit more a bit more of an example from my background as well into what we were talking about then, because like customer experience trying to claim its own budgets for capex and opex might not necessarily, especially if you're not established and you haven't got the buy-in, isn't the best thing to do. It's how can what we do as CX team or professionals or whatever support another area of the business with the objective that they're trying to deliver. How can we increase their return on investment through what we do? Was the route that I took initially. So I wasn't there asking for capex and opex on my own projects. I was demonstrating how we could increase the return on investment of other projects with a bit of customer experience, and eventually that led to me being able to ask for capex and opex of my own, because we've proven that it works. But I didn't it's a big leap for senior leaders to take, to believe in something that isn't proven, and it's just a mindset I think we need to get away from, that proving return on investment of CX in isolation is something that is going to be really difficult to do before you've demonstrated CX as part of the broader business proposition, like we were talking about, in digital, in marketing, in the established teams that do already have budgets. You're better off going over there and adding value to what they're doing than doing the other way around.
And we cannot be talking about CX in isolation, because CX by nature is a glue that unites all of the functions to work together to deliver customer outcomes. So by default, it cannot be in isolation. We don't have the skills to run the entire company. We can just be one of the enablers. That's why it's customer enabled organizations that I talk about. And there are some things that you can even do with no budget, zero budget at all.
Yeah, we've done it, haven't we?
Yes, and
I'm
going to let you in on a secret. We're working on this new CX Wikipedia product, which is going to have a library of useful stuff. And one of the sections there is kind of CX micro actions, things that you can do just like that. You don't need a permission, you don't need a budget. Like, for example, one of those is in our contact center at D&G. We put up a sign to say customer can hear a smile. That completely transformed conversations. When agents started smiling on the phone, that mitigates angry customers, that helps agents to feel better, and that really lifted up our customer feedback scores. So that I'm very excited building this micro actions library.
Sounds super helpful, and so often it's the simple things that make the biggest difference, and we don't hear enough about that, do we? It's the big, complicated, inflated intellectualizations around customer experience, rather than just the in the muck and bullets, the simple things that work and can drive a return with zero investment. I love that. So to kind of just rounding this off then, like, we've been talking about strategy, we've been talking about implementation. What are your thoughts on getting the right balance? Clearly, I'm an advocate of implementation over strategy, that can buy you the ticket to the table to get the seat at the game where you can start to influence strategy. But what are your thoughts? Where do you sit on this continuum?
I think, I don't know if there is again, one size fits all. If you have senior management buy-in right from the start, you typically need to give them a sense of direction. So you need to create the strategy. You need to have CX decision-making principles. So what is it that we promise to customers and how we deliver that? You may consider creating C-suite engagement toolkit for them, just to tell them how you expect them to live that strategy, and then cascade that down. If you don't have a C-level buy-in, then you should definitely focus more on achieving micro results, then micro results, then bigger results, and building your portfolio of successful projects before you can actually turn that into a coherent strategy that is going to be signed off by the leadership. So it really is a judgment call. In my work, what I typically practice, just based on the clients I work with, is 20% spent on what we call CX foundations, that is strategy, journey mapping, and research, and 80% implementing that.
No, that sounds like a really good balance to have. But yeah, and kind of bringing that really into focus, one of the big dependencies about the approach you take is the maturity of the organization and how customer enabled it already is. I think that's really super practical advice for our listeners as well. I'm sure they've appreciated this conversation.
I hope so.
Lots of examples in there. So finally, Olga, what would be your one piece of advice or your top takeaway for the women in CX listeners out there? What would you like to leave them with?
I think I really enjoyed our conversation about the success path, and on that, I think being the future version of yourself is my top advice. Be who you want to be.
Yeah, and quite often it's who you already are, right? But being able to own your success at where you're at today. Sometimes it's easier said than done, and not being held back by like previous experiences or beliefs is one of the most challenging things to do. So yeah, get out there, girls, own your success, be who you are today. Don't let the past hold you back. I'm with Olga on that one. So that's it, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to Olga.
Thank you so much for having me. That was a pleasure, and thanks. I'm very honored to be the first one to be here twice.
Yay.
It's amazing. Thank you.
and long may our friendship, relationship, and community building experience happen well into the future, Olga. Thank you so much. I'll see you all next time. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Women in CX podcast with me, Clare Muscutt. If you enjoyed the show, please drop us a like, subscribe and leave a review on whichever platform you're listening or watching on. And if you want to know more about becoming a member of the world's first online community for women in customer experience, please check out womeninCX.community and follow the Women in CX page on LinkedIn. Join us again next time, where I'll be talking to one of our founding members from Belgium about overcoming childhood trauma to become the women we were always destined to be. See you all next time.